By the time Mara Whitlock read the words "payment overdue, foreclosure imminent," the bank had already sent riders to Red Hollow Ranch. Two men she'd never met stood at her door with marriage contracts in their hands and secrets buried deeper than Montana frost. Her father was 6 weeks in the ground. Her sister Elena wept in the kitchen. The cattle were dying. And now these strangers, one haunted, one charming, both desperate, claimed they'd come to save them. But you can't save what you're running from. Stay with us until the very end of this story. Hit that like button and comment your city below so I can see how far this tale has traveled. The wind that November carried teeth. Mara Whitlock stood at the fence line of Red Hollow Ranch, her father's old coat hanging loose on her shoulders, watching the horizon swallow the sun. The land stretched before her in shades of dying gold and bitter gray, 2,000 acres that had once meant freedom, prosperity, legacy. Now it meant only debt. Behind her, the ranch house slouched against the wind like a boxer taking punches it couldn't return. Paint peeled from the siding. The porch steps sagged. Somewhere inside, her younger sister Elena was trying to make soup from the last of the dried beans and a venison bone they'd already boiled twice. Mara's hands gripped the fence rail, rough wood biting into her palms. She'd stopped wearing gloves 3 weeks ago. There was no point protecting hands that would be someone else's problem soon enough. "Mara!" Elena's voice cut through the wind, sharp with something that might have been fear or excitement. With Elena, it was often hard to tell the difference. "Mara, come quick!" She turned slowly, her body heavy with the kind of exhaustion that sleep couldn't touch. Elena stood in the doorway, her blonde hair escaping its braid, her cheeks flushed despite the cold. She was 22, 4 years younger than Mara, and somehow still believed that urgency could change things. "What is it?" "There's someone coming. 2 riders, from town." Mara's stomach dropped. The bank. It had to be the bank. They'd sent letters, 3 of them now, each one more pointed than the last. Outstanding balance, immediate payment required, legal action pending. She'd read them each once, then burned them in the stove, as if fire could erase numbers. "Go inside," Mara said, starting toward the house. "I'm not a child." "Elena." Mara's voice came out harder than she intended. "Please." For once, her sister listened, retreating into the house but leaving the door cracked open. Mara could feel her watching as she walked to the center of the yard, positioning herself between whatever was coming and everything that remained. The riders emerged from the tree line, 2 figures dark against the lowering sky. Not the bank's men, she realized with a jolt. These were strangers. One sat his horse with military straightness, the other rode with an easy slouch that suggested either confidence or exhaustion. As they drew closer, details emerged. The first man tall and broad-shouldered, maybe 35, with dark hair and a jaw that looked carved from granite. The second was younger, lighter, his face open and almost handsome under a layer of trail dust. They stopped 10 feet from where she stood. "Miss Whitlock?" The dark-haired one spoke first, his voice low and careful, as if he were approaching a spooked animal. "Mara Whitlock? Who's asking?" "My name is Graham Hale. This is Lucas Reed." He gestured to his companion, who tipped his hat with a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "We received your letter about the arrangement." For a moment, Mara's mind went blank. Letter. Arrangement. Then the memory surfaced like something dredged from deep water, and her face went hot despite the cold. "No. That wasn't—" She stopped, forced herself to breathe. "That letter wasn't supposed to be sent." Elena had written it 6 weeks ago, in the first raw days after their father's funeral. Mara had found it on the kitchen table one morning, a carefully penned advertisement to a matrimonial agency in Chicago, seeking men of good character and strong constitution willing to assist in ranch operations in exchange for partnership and matrimony. They'd fought about it, Elena insisting it was their only option, Mara refusing to sell herself like livestock. In the end, Mara thought she'd won. She'd taken the letter, folded it carefully, and placed it in her father's desk drawer. She'd never checked to see if it had stayed there. "I'm afraid it was sent," Lucas spoke up, his voice carrying a western drawl that suggested Texas or maybe Oklahoma. "Received it about 3 weeks ago. Took us a while to make the journey." "Then you've wasted your time." Mara's words came out clipped, final. "We're not interested." "Mara, Elena's voice came from the doorway, thin and desperate. Go inside, Elena. No. Her sister stepped fully onto the porch, her arms wrapped around herself against the cold. No, I won't. The two men watched this exchange with careful neutrality. Graham's face remained unreadable, but Lucas's eyes moved between the sisters with something that might have been understanding. Perhaps we could discuss this inside, Graham suggested. Out of the wind. There's nothing to discuss. Please. Elena's voice broke on the word. Mara, please. Just let them water their horses. Let them rest for an hour. Then if you want them to go, I won't argue. It was the surrender in her sister's voice that did it. The way Elena's pride, usually so fierce and stubborn, collapsed like wet paper. Mara looked at her, really looked, and saw what she'd been trying not to see for weeks. Elena was thinner. Her dress hung loose. The shadows under her eyes spoke of nights spent crying quietly so Mara wouldn't hear. 1 hour, Mara said finally. Then you ride out. The inside of the house told its own story. Graham noticed it immediately as they stepped through the door, the way spaces contract when money leaves them. The parlor that should have held furniture instead held emptiness, marked by lighter squares on the wallpaper where paintings once hung. The dining table was good oak, but only 2 chairs remained. The air smelled of wood smoke and something cooking that was more water than substance. He'd seen this before. In Kansas, after the grasshopper plagues. In Texas, after the droughts. In 100 hardscrabble homesteads where pride was the last thing people had left to lose. Coffee? Elena asked, her voice overly bright as she bustled toward the kitchen. We have coffee. It's not much, but we're fine. Mara cut her off, still standing by the door, as if ready to throw them out at any moment. Say what you came to say. Graham exchanged a glance with Lucas, who shrugged slightly. They'd discuss this on the road, what they'd say, how they'd explain. But all their rehearsed words felt inadequate now, standing in this dying house with these 2 women watching them with such different expressions. Elena's desperate hope, Mara's iron mistrust. The letter made clear what you were offering, Graham began. Partnership in the ranch. Marriage, eventually, once all parties were certain of compatibility. In exchange for labor and investment. We don't have any money, Mara said flatly. If that's what you're expecting. We weren't expecting money. Lucas spoke up, his drawl softening the words. Letters said you had land. Said you had a working ranch that needed hands. We're not looking for a fortune, Miss Whitlock. We're looking for a place to stand still for a while. Something flickered across Mara's face. Surprise, maybe, or suspicion. Why? Why what? Why would 2 able-bodied men travel halfway across the country to work a failing ranch for the promise of marriage to women they've never met? Her eyes moved between them, sharp and assessing. What are you running from? The question landed in the space between them like a stone dropped down a well. Graham felt Lucas tense beside him, felt his own shoulders go rigid. This woman was no fool. She'd looked at them for 30 seconds and seen straight through to the truth they'd spent 3 weeks on the road trying to outpace. Everyone's running from something, Lucas said lightly, but his smile had gone brittle at the edges. That's not an answer. Mara. Elena had returned from the kitchen, carrying cups, even though no one had accepted coffee. You can't interrogate them. They came all this way. They came because they want something. I'm trying to figure out what. They want what we're offering. Elena's voice rose, frustration finally breaking through. They want land and partnership and a chance to build something, the same thing Papa wanted when he came out here. The same thing we want. Why is that so hard to believe? Because people don't give up everything they have for nothing. Mara's voice rose to match her sister's. Because men don't travel 1,000 miles to marry strangers unless they can't go home. The silence that followed was absolute. Graham watched Mara's chest rise and fall, watched her realize what she'd said, watched her refuse to take it back. Her jaw set in a hard line, daring them to deny it. He couldn't. You're right, he said quietly. We can't go home. Mara's eyes snapped to him, surprise replacing suspicion. At least I can't, he continued. Lucas has his own reasons, but mine are simple enough. I made choices I can't unmake, did things I can't undo. And the places I'm from don't have any interest in who I try to be now. They only care about who I was then. What did you do? He met her gaze steadily. Nothing I'm ashamed of, but plenty that other people think I should be. It wasn't an answer, and they both knew it, but it was the truth as far as he could give it. Behind him, he felt Lucas shift his weight, unsure whether to support Graham's partial confession or deflect with humor. The younger man settled for silence. Elena set the coffee cups down with hands that shook slightly. Does it matter? She asked, her voice small. If they're willing to work, if they're willing to help us save this place, does their past really matter? Mara looked at her sister, and something in her face softened. Not much, just a fraction, but enough to show the love beneath the hardness. It matters if their past follows them here. What past doesn't? Lucas asked. The question was quiet, genuine, stripped of his usual charm. You think your neighbors don't know you're in debt? You think the bank hasn't told everyone in town that Red Hollow is finished? Everyone's got a past, Miss Whitlock. The question is whether you're willing to let people have a future too. Mara's eyes moved to him, studying his face. For a long moment, she didn't speak. Outside, the wind picked up, rattling the windows in their frames. The house creaked and settled around them, old wood remembering what it used to be. I need to think, she said finally. Elena, show them the bunkhouse. They can stay the night. In the morning, I'll have an answer. Mara, so... One night, Elena. That's all I'm promising. The bunkhouse was worse than the main house. Graham had to duck to avoid a beam that sagged dangerously low in the center of the room. The structure had been built for 6 men, maybe 8 in close quarters, but now housed only ghosts and spiderwebs. 4 bunks lined the walls, their mattresses gone or rotted through. A potbelly stove sat cold in the corner, its pipe disconnected and leaning at an angle. I know it's not much, Elena said from the doorway, her voice apologetic. We sold most of the equipment 2 months ago. Had to let the hands go before that. It's just been the 2 of us since Papa... She trailed off, unable or unwilling to finish. How'd he die? Lucas asked. His voice was gentle, but Graham shot him a look anyway. Some questions didn't need asking. Elena didn't seem to mind. Horse threw him out near the north pasture. By the time Mara found him, he'd been lying there for hours. Doc said it was the cold that killed him in the end, not the fall. She wrapped her arms around herself, though the bunkhouse was barely colder than outside. He was 62, strong as an ox his whole life, and he died because he couldn't get up. The story settled over them like dust. I'm sorry, Graham said, and meant it. Elena nodded, blinking hard. The bank gave us 60 days to catch up on payments. That was 5 weeks ago. We've sold everything that wasn't nailed down, and it's still not enough. Mara keeps saying she'll figure something out, but she looked at them both, her eyes desperate and young. There's nothing left to figure. We need help. Real help. The kind that stays. And your sister? Graham asked. She doesn't agree? Mara doesn't trust easily. She never has, but after Papa died, it got worse. She thinks she has to hold everything together by herself, like if she shows weakness for even a second, the whole world will collapse. Elena's voice was fond, despite the frustration. She doesn't understand that asking for help isn't weakness, it's just sense. Lucas had wandered over to one of the bunks and was testing its frame with his boot. These are solid, he said. Probably just need new ropes and mattresses, some straw in a pinch. There's straw in the barn, Elena offered. Not much, but enough for a night or 2. We'll make do. Graham looked around the bunkhouse again, mentally cataloging what could be fixed and what would need replacing. Miss Whitlock, Elena, can I ask you something? Of course. That letter you sent. The advertisement. Your sister said it wasn't supposed to go out. Did you send it without her permission? Elena's face flushed. I knew she'd say no. She's been saying no to everything since Papa died. No to selling the ranch. No to asking the neighbors for help. No to anything that looks like surrender. But I also knew she'd work herself into the ground before she'd admit we can't do this alone. She lifted her chin defiantly. So yes, I sent it without asking. I sent it because someone had to do something before there was nothing left to save. The words hung in the air, righteous and raw. Graham found himself respecting this young woman despite, or maybe because of, her desperation. She'd made a choice that terrified her and stood by it. That took a particular kind of courage. "Your sister's going to be angry when she finds out," Lucas observed. "She'll forgive me." Elena said it like a prayer. "Eventually." No. They sent Elena back to the house as the sun disappeared behind the mountains, painting the sky in shades of blood and ash. Graham and Lucas worked in silence, hauling straw from the barn to stuff makeshift mattresses, reconnecting the stovepipe, sweeping out months of accumulated dirt and debris. It was Lucas who finally broke the quiet. "This is worse than I thought." Graham didn't ask what he meant. They'd both seen it. The ranch held together by stubbornness and not much else. Fences that needed mending. Barns with roofs going soft. A corral that could maybe hold horses if those horses were particularly lazy and unambitious. "We can fix it," Graham said. "Can we?" Lucas leaned on his broom, his face serious in the gathering dark. "Graham, this isn't just a few weeks of hard work. This is months, maybe years, and that's assuming the bank gives them time. Assuming those sisters can work together long enough to see it through. Assuming we stay," Graham finished. "Which is the point, isn't it? That's what they need, what we need, a place to stay." Lucas was quiet for a long moment. Outside, a coyote called, its voice lonely and wild. "You really think we can do this? Make a life here?" "I don't know," Graham said honestly, "but I know I'm tired of running. Aren't you?" Lucas didn't answer. Instead, he went back to sweeping, his movements sharp and irritated. Graham knew that mood, had seen it surface every time they'd gotten a letter at the last 3 towns. Letters with familiar handwriting that Lucas read once, then burned. Letters he never talked about. Everyone had ghosts. The question was whether you let them haunt you or put them to rest. Graham finished securing the last section of stovepipe and stood back to survey their work. The bunkhouse wasn't comfortable, but it was functional. They'd sleep warmer than they had in the last week of traveling. In the morning, assuming Mara Whitlock didn't run them off at gunpoint, they'd start work. If she did run them off, well, they'd deal with that too. "I'm going to walk the property," Graham said, heading for the door. "Get a sense of what we're working with." "It's dark." "I have eyes." Lucas snorted. "Stubborn bastard. That's why you love me." "I tolerate you. There's a difference." Graham smiled despite himself and stepped out into the night. Mara stood at her bedroom window, watching the stranger walk her land in the darkness. She'd blown out her lamp 20 minutes ago, but hadn't undressed for bed. Instead, she'd stood here, tracking the tall figure as it moved from the barn to the corral, from the corral to the equipment shed, from the shed to the fence line. He walked like a man surveying a battlefield, methodical, assessing, missing nothing. Graham Hale. The name felt foreign in her mouth, like a word from a language she'd never learned. He'd been a soldier, she was sure of it now, watching the way he carried himself. But he'd said he couldn't go home, that he'd made choices others thought he should be ashamed of. What did that mean? Desertion? Cowardice? Something worse? A knock at her door made her turn. "I know you're awake," Elena said from the hallway. "I can see the light under your door." There was no light, but Mara opened the door anyway. Her sister stood in her nightgown, her blonde hair loose around her shoulders, looking younger than her 22 years. "You're angry," Elena said. It wasn't a question. "I'm tired." "That too." Elena slipped past her into the room, sitting on the edge of the bed like she had when they were children and the world was simpler. But mostly angry. At me. For sending the letter. Mara wanted to deny it, but lies had never served them well. "You went behind my back." "I did." "You made a decision that affects both of us without asking." "I did that too." "And you brought 2 strange men to our home, men who admit they're running from their pasts. Men who are willing to help us." Elena's voice rose, defensive. "Men who traveled 1,000 miles because we asked, because I asked. Mara, what else were we supposed to do?" "I don't know." The words burst out of Mara, louder than she intended. She pressed her palms against her eyes, feeling the pressure behind them that might become tears if she let it. "I don't know, Elena, but there had to be another way, something that didn't require us to marry strangers. something that didn't require us to trust people we don't know. Trust has to start somewhere. Trust has to be earned. Elena stood, crossing to where her sister stood. Then let them earn it. Give them a chance. 1 week. That's all I'm asking. Let them work. Let them show us who they are. If after a week you still want them gone, I'll help you pack their bags myself. Mara looked at her sister, really looked. Elena had always been the soft one, the dreamer, the one who believed in happy endings. But there was steel in her spine now, forged by the same losses and fears that had hardened Mara. They'd both buried their father. They'd both watched the ranch die by inches. They'd both lain awake in the dark, adding numbers that refused to balance. 1 week, Mara said finally, but they sleep in the bunkhouse. They eat after we do. And if I see one thing that makes me think they're dangerous or dishonest, they'll be gone before sunrise, Elena promised. Thank you, Mara. Thank you. She hugged her sister quickly, then disappeared back into the hallway, leaving Mara alone with her window and her doubts. Outside, the stranger, Graham, had stopped at the fence line, staring out at the darkness beyond. Even from here, Mara could see the weight he carried in his shoulders, the way he stood like a man expecting something to emerge from the shadows and strike. What are you running from? She wondered. And will it follow you here? The wind gave her no answer, only its endless, indifferent howl. Dawn came cold and sharp, painting the world in shades of frost and pale gold. Graham woke to the sound of someone chopping wood, an axe striking home with rhythmic precision. He dressed quickly in the dim light, noting that Lucas's bunk was empty, his blanket already folded with military corners despite Lucas never having served a day in uniform. Outside, he found Mara at the woodpile, her breath clouding in the frigid air as she worked. She'd changed into men's work clothes, canvas pants and a heavy flannel shirt that might have been her father's. Her dark hair was braided tight against her skull, and she swung the axe with practiced efficiency, splitting logs with 2 strikes where most men would need 3. She saw him watching and didn't stop working. There's coffee in the house. Help yourself. I can do that. Graham gestured to the woodpile. The chopping. I've been doing it for 6 weeks. I can manage another morning. I'm sure you can. But if I'm going to be here, I might as well make myself useful. Mara drove the axe into the chopping block and finally turned to face him. In the morning light, he could see details he'd missed the night before. The freckles across her nose, the calluses on her hands, the scar that bisected her left eyebrow. She was beautiful in the way granite is beautiful, all hard lines and uncompromising angles. My sister tells me I'm supposed to give you a week, she said. That's generous? It's foolish, but Elena thinks you deserve a chance, and I've learned to trust her instincts even when they terrify me. She pulled the axe free and held it out to him. So here's how this works. You and your friend will help with the morning chores, feeding, milking, cleaning stalls. After breakfast, you'll repair the fence in the east pasture. It's been down for 2 weeks, and we've lost 3 head of cattle because of it. After that, we'll see. Graham took the axe, their fingers brushing briefly in the exchange. Her hands were cold. And if we do good work, then you'll get another day, and another, until either we trust each other or we don't. She met his eyes steadily. But understand this, Mr. Hale. I'm not looking for a husband. I'm looking for someone who can help me save this land. Everything else is negotiable. Fair enough. Is it? Something flickered in her expression. Curiosity, maybe, or challenge. Most men would be insulted by that. Most men are idiots. Graham tested the axe's balance, found it good. I'm not interested in a wife who doesn't want me, Miss Whitlock. If we do this, it'll be because we both choose it, not because a contract says we should. For the first time since they'd arrived, Mara almost smiled. It was barely there, just a softening at the corners of her mouth, but it changed her entire face. Elena was right about you. What did she say? That you weren't like other men she'd met. Mara started toward the house, then paused. Don't prove her wrong, Mr. Hale. We've had enough disappointment. She left him there with the axe and the woodpile and the vast Montana sky turning gold overhead. Graham set to work, feeling the familiar burn in his shoulders as he split log after log, each strike of the blade a promise. I'm staying, I'm staying, I'm staying. Behind him, the bunkhouse door opened and Lucas emerged, yawning and scratching his stubbled jaw. She really makes you work for it, doesn't she? Would you respect her if she didn't? Lucas considered this, then grinned. Fair point. He stretched, his back cracking audibly. Come on then, let's show these ladies what two desperate men with something to prove can do. They worked through the morning, feeding the handful of remaining cattle, mucking stalls in the barn, checking the horses, and the one milk cow that looked at them with profound suspicion. Elena brought them bread and butter at mid-morning, along with more coffee, her smile warm despite the cold. Mara's watching from the house, she confided. She won't admit it, but she's impressed. By what? Lucas asked. We haven't done anything special. You showed up, Elena said simply. And you stayed. That's more than most people have done. After she left, they gathered tools and headed for the east pasture. The fence was worse than Mara had described. Not just down, but destroyed, as if something large and angry had gone through it. Posts snapped off at ground level, wire tangled in vicious coils, rails splintered and scattered across 50 yards. Bear, you think? Lucas asked, surveying the damage. Or cattle panicking? Graham knelt to examine a post. Doesn't matter. We need to rebuild the whole section. It was brutal work, digging new post holes in ground that fought every shovel thrust, wrestling barbed wire into submission, cutting and fitting rails with hands that grew raw despite gloves. They worked through the afternoon, barely stopping to eat the sandwiches Elena brought at noon. By the time the sun began its descent, they'd finished 2/3 of the damaged section. Graham's shoulders screamed, his back ached, and he could feel blisters forming on his palms despite the calluses. Beside him, Lucas looked equally destroyed, his face flushed and his breathing heavy. Tomorrow, Graham said, driving the last post home. We'll finish tomorrow. They walked back to the ranch house in the gathering dusk, too tired for conversation. As they approached, Graham saw Mara standing on the porch, her arms crossed, watching them come. When they reached her, she looked past them toward the pasture. Even from here, the new fence line was visible, straight and strong, cutting across the land like a promise kept. You'll finish tomorrow? She asked. Yes, ma'am. She nodded once, then turned to go inside. At the door, she paused. Mr. Hale, Mr. Reed, thank you for today's work. Supper will be ready in an hour. You're welcome to join us in the house. It was a small thing, an invitation to a meal, but the way she said it, formal and careful, as if each word cost her something, made it feel like more, like a door opening, just a crack, letting in the first cold draft of possibility. We'd be honored, Graham said. Mara disappeared inside, leaving them on the porch with their exhaustion and their cautious hope. Well, Lucas said softly, that's something. It's a start. Think it'll last? This week she's giving us? Graham looked out at the land, at the mountains going purple in the fading light, at the ranch that was broken and beautiful and worth saving. I don't know, but I'm going to work like it will. That night they ate at the table in the main house. Simple food, stew and bread, but warm and filling. The conversation was careful, dancing around dangerous topics, but Elena kept it moving with questions about their journey, about the country they'd traveled through. Mara stayed mostly quiet, but Graham caught her watching him sometimes, her eyes thoughtful. Later, lying in his bunk in the darkness, Graham thought about the document folded in his pack, the discharge papers marked with words like insubordination and conduct unbecoming. Thought about the choice he'd made that had ended his career and started this long flight west. He'd refused an order, a direct command from a superior officer, had been told to lead his men into a massacre disguised as a military action, and he'd said no. They'd stripped his rank, dishonorably discharged him, and made sure every fort and outpost from Carolina to California knew his name and his shame. He'd been branded a coward, a traitor, a man who broke when honor demanded he stand firm. But he'd looked at that order, at what they'd wanted him to do, and known in his bones it was wrong. Morally, fundamentally wrong. So he'd refused, accepted the consequences, and walked away from the only life he'd known. Now he was here, at the edge of the world, in a dying ranch with two women who needed help and didn't trust him. It felt right. It felt like where he was supposed to be. Tomorrow, he'd finish the fence. Tomorrow, he'd prove himself worth keeping. Tomorrow, he'd take another step toward becoming someone new, someone unshackled from what he'd been forced to leave behind. Outside, the wind sang its cold song, and somewhere in the darkness, the land waited to see if he was strong enough to stay. The fence was finished by noon the next day. Graham drove the final staple into place and stepped back, wiping sweat from his forehead despite the November chill. Beside him, Lucas tested the wire tension one last time, then nodded his approval. The new fence line stretched across the east pasture, strong and true, replacing the wreckage that had been there 24 hours before. "Not bad for two strangers," Lucas said, coiling the leftover wire. "Not bad at all." Mara's voice came from behind them, and both men turned to find her sitting astride a gray mare, watching them with an expression that might have been respect. She'd ridden up so quietly neither had heard her approach. "You've done good work." Graham felt an unexpected warmth at the praise. "Fence should hold through winter. Come spring, you might want to reinforce the corner posts, but it'll do for now." Mara dismounted in one fluid motion, walking the fence line with a critical eye. She tested posts, checked wire tension, examined their cuts and joins with the thoroughness of someone who'd built 1,000 fences. Finally, she turned back to them. "My father taught me to judge a man by his work," she said. "He'd say you can tell everything you need to know about someone by how they finish a job. Whether they cut corners, whether they rush, whether they care about what comes after they're gone." She paused, her hand resting on one of the new posts. "You built this fence like you planned to be here to see it stand. Like it matters." "It does matter," Graham said simply. "Does it? Or are you just trying to convince me to let you stay?" The question wasn't accusatory, just curious, and Graham found himself answering honestly. "Both, maybe. But mostly because I'm tired of doing work that doesn't last. Tired of being temporary." Something shifted in Mara's expression, a softening around her eyes that suggested she understood more than he'd said. "Elena's making lunch. Come eat before you tackle whatever you're planning to tackle next." They gathered their tools and followed her back toward the house, the mare trailing behind on a loose lead. The ranch looked different in daylight, Graham thought. Less desperate, maybe, or just more clearly defined. He could see now what it had been, what it might be again, a working operation with good bones beneath the decay. "Miss Whitlock," Lucas spoke up as they walked. "That barn roof, when's the last time someone checked the supports?" Mara's jaw tightened. "Last spring. Why?" "Noticed some sagging along the ridgeline yesterday. Might be nothing, but might be worth looking at before we get heavy snow." "Add it to the list." Her voice had gone flat, and Graham recognized the tone. Too many problems, not enough solutions, the weight of it all pressing down like that sagging roof. "Right now I'm more worried about the well. Water pressure's been dropping. If that goes—" She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't have to. A ranch without water was a ranch without a future. They ate lunch at the kitchen table, thick slices of bread, butter, and venison from a deer Lucas had shot that morning. Elena kept the conversation light, asking about their plans for the afternoon, carefully avoiding anything too personal. But Graham noticed her watching Lucas when she thought no one was looking, something curious and cautious in her gaze. "I should check that well," Graham said when they'd finished eating. "See if there's an obvious problem." "I'll come with you," Mara said, already standing. "Elena, can you show Lucas the barn? Get his opinion on that roof?" Elena's face brightened. "Of course." They split up outside the house, Mara and Graham heading toward the well house near the north pasture, Elena and Lucas disappearing toward the barn. The afternoon sun was weak and watery, doing little to cut the cold. "You don't have to fix everything in 1 week," Mara said as they walked. "I know the place is falling apart. I know there's more work than 4 people can handle. I'm not expecting miracles." "What are you expecting?" She considered the question. "Honestly, I don't know anymore. When my father was alive, I expected to run this ranch with him until I was old. Expected to marry someone local, someone I'd known my whole life. Expected things to stay the way they'd always been." She kicked at a stone in the path. "But expectations are luxuries. Now I just try to make it through each day. That's not sustainable." "No," she agreed quietly. "It's not." They reached the well house, a small wooden structure that housed the pump mechanism. Graham opened the door and immediately smelled damp earth and rust. Inside, the pump showed signs of neglect, Seals cracking, connections loose, the whole assembly shaking when he worked the handle. When's the last time someone serviced this? 2 years, maybe? We couldn't afford it last year. Mara stood in the doorway, arms crossed against the cold. Can you fix it? I can try. Need to take it apart, see what's salvageable. He ran his hands over the mechanism, mentally cataloging parts and problems. Might need to order replacements from town. That gonna be an issue? Money's always an issue. Mara's voice was matter-of-fact, without self-pity. But a broken well is a bigger issue. Do what you need to do. I'll figure out how to pay for it. Graham straightened, meeting her eyes in the dim light of the well house. Miss Whitlock. Mara, can I ask you something direct? You're going to anyway. How bad is it? The debt? For a moment, he thought she wouldn't answer. Then she sighed, the sound carrying all her exhaustion. $3,000. That's what we owe the bank. We've paid off maybe $300 in the last 6 weeks, selling everything that wasn't nailed down. At this rate, we'd need 2 years to clear it. We have 3 weeks. The numbers hit him like a physical blow. $3,000 might as well have been $3 million for a ranch this size, this isolated, this close to collapse. There has to be a way, he said, more to himself than to her. If there is, I haven't found it. Mara turned to look out at the land beyond the well house, acres and acres of brown grass and gray sky, beautiful and indifferent. My father mortgaged everything to buy new breeding stock 5 years ago, said it was an investment in the future. Then the cattle got sick, half the calves died, and we were left with debt and nothing to show for it. Her voice was steady, reciting facts like they were someone else's tragedy. We've been bleeding ever since. Slowly at first, then faster. By the time Papa died, there was nothing left but the land itself. And you're trying to hold on to it alone, not alone anymore. She looked at him, and something in her expression made his chest tighten. For better or worse, you're here now. You and Lucas and whatever ghosts you're both running from. Graham almost told her then. Almost pulled out the discharge papers and explained everything. The order he'd refused, the career he'd lost, the name he could never fully escape. But the moment passed, and he found himself saying instead, everyone deserves a chance to start over. Do they? Mara's question was soft, almost philosophical. Or do we just carry our mistakes with us wherever we go? Maybe both. Maybe we carry them until we're strong enough to set them down. She studied him for a long moment, then nodded slowly. Fix the well, Mr. Hale, one problem at a time. Across the ranch, in the dusty shadows of the barn, Elena and Lucas were having their own reckoning. Lucas stood on a ladder, examining the roof supports with growing concern. The wood was sound in places, rotted through in others, and the whole structure settled unevenly on its foundation. A few more months, one heavy snow, and the entire roof might come down. This is bad, he called down to Elena. Not catastrophic yet, but heading that direction. Can you fix it? Elena held the ladder steady, her face tilted up toward where Lucas worked. With time and materials, sure, but it's not a one-day job. More like a week, maybe 2. He climbed down, brushing dust and cobwebs from his clothes. You'd need new support beams for this section, new roofing along the west side, and the foundation needs shoring up before you do anything else. Elena's shoulders sagged. More money we don't have. Hey, Lucas's voice softened. I wasn't asking for payment, just being honest about what needs doing. I know. I appreciate the honesty. She walked deeper into the barn, running her hand along an empty stall. This place used to be full, 20 horses, a dozen milk cows, more chickens than you could count. My father loved it. Loved the noise and the chaos, and the feeling that everything was alive. Her hand dropped. Now it's just empty. A building waiting to fall down. Lucas followed her, his boots loud in the hollow space. It doesn't have to stay that way. Doesn't it? Elena turned to face him, and Lucas saw tears standing in her eyes, though she blinked them back fiercely. You've been here 2 days, Lucas. You've seen what we're up against. A fence and a well pump aren't going to save Red Hollow. We need money. We need time. We need... She trailed off, shaking her head. A miracle? Lucas suggested gently. I was going to say luck, but that too. She smiled despite herself. My sister thinks I'm a foolish dreamer. Maybe she's right. Maybe bringing you and Graham here was just another desperate fantasy. Or maybe it was the smartest thing you could have done. Lucas closed the distance between them, stopping a respectful few feet away. Look, I'm not going to lie and say everything's going to be fine. I don't know if we can save this place, but I know Graham and I are willing to try, and I know that's better than facing it alone. Elena searched his face, looking for something, truth maybe, or sincerity. Why? She asked. Why would you do this for strangers? It was the same question Mara had asked, and Lucas found himself giving the same kind of half answer. Because everyone needs a place to land, and maybe we're all strangers until we're not. That's not a real answer. No, Lucas admitted, but it's the one you're getting today. Something in Elena's expression shuddered, and Lucas mentally cursed himself. She'd asked a direct question, deserved a direct answer, and he'd deflected like a coward. But how could he explain the letters that followed him from town to town? The obligations he was trying to outrun? The choice he'd have to make eventually between here and there, between the life he wanted and the life others expected of him? I should get back to the house, Elena said, her voice carefully neutral. There's mending to do before supper. Elena, wait. But she was already moving toward the barn door, her footsteps quick and purposeful. Lucas watched her go, frustration and regret warring in his chest. He'd come to Montana to escape complications, but somehow he'd found new ones, wrapped in the form of a blonde woman with sad eyes and too much hope. He stayed in the barn for a while after she left, examining supports and calculating costs, but his mind kept drifting. Finally, he climbed down and went to find Graham at the well house. He found his friend elbow-deep in the pump mechanism, rust and grease streaking his arms. How's it look? Terrible, Graham said cheerfully. But fixable. Need parts from town, though. I'll make a list, ride in tomorrow. I'll come with you. Graham glanced up, reading something in Lucas's expression. What happened? Nothing. Everything. I don't know. Lucas sat on the edge of the well house, suddenly tired. That girl, Elena, she asked me why we're really here, why we'd help them. What'd you tell her? Nothing useful, same vague deflection I always give. He dragged a hand through his hair. I'm not good at this, Graham. The honesty thing, the staying put thing. I keep waiting for the other boot to drop. What boot? Lucas pulled a letter from his pocket. The most recent one. Arrived 3 days before they'd left for Montana. He'd read it once, then tried to forget it existed. Now he handed it to Graham without comment. Graham wiped his hands on a rag and unfolded the letter carefully. Lucas watched his face as he read, saw the concern that flickered across it. Your brother's getting married, Graham said finally. In 6 weeks. Wants me there. Expects me there. Lucas took the letter back, staring at handwriting he knew as well as his own. Says the family's asking about me. Says I can't hide forever. Says it's time to come home and face my responsibilities. What responsibilities? The family business, the land, everything my father built that I was supposed to inherit and continue. Lucas laughed bitterly. Everything I ran from because I couldn't stand the idea of spending my whole life doing what was expected instead of what I wanted. Graham was quiet for a moment, considering. You gonna go? I don't know, maybe, probably. Lucas met his friend's eyes. But if I do, I won't be coming back. My brother made that clear. Come home for good or don't come at all. The family's done waiting for me to figure myself out. That's not fair. No, but it's real. Lucas folded the letter, tucking it back in his pocket like a promise or a threat. So when Elena asks why I'm here, what I'm running from, how do I explain that I'm hiding from people who love me, from obligations I should want to honor? How do I make that sound like anything other than cowardice? It's not cowardice to want to choose your own life, isn't it? When people depend on you, when you're needed? Lucas shook his head. My father's sick, Graham. Not dying, not yet, but getting there. And I'm here, 1,000 miles away, pretending I can just walk away from that. Graham set down his tools and gave Lucas his full attention. You came here because you needed to, because staying there was killing you slowly. I remember you couldn't sleep, couldn't eat, were drinking too much and fighting more. You were drowning in other people's expectations. Maybe I should have drowned. Maybe that's what good sons do. Good sons don't sacrifice themselves on altars built by other people. Graham's voice was firm, certain. You came here to save yourself, Lucas. There's no shame in that. Then why do I feel so guilty? Before Graham could answer, Mara's voice cut through the afternoon. Mr. Hale! Mr. Reed! They turned to see her running toward them from the house, her face pale and tight. Elena appeared behind her, equally distressed, and Lucas felt his stomach drop. What's wrong? Graham was already moving toward them. Ryder from town, Mara panted, skidding to a stop. The bank. They've moved up the deadline. We don't have 3 weeks anymore. We have 1. The words landed like stones in deep water, sinking heavy and final. 1 week? Lucas repeated. That's not... They can't just change the terms. They can do whatever they want. They hold the note. Mara's voice shook despite her effort to control it. The writer said there's been interest from a buyer, someone who wants the land, wants it fast, and is willing to pay off our debt for the bank in exchange for the deed. The bank's giving us 7 days to match the offer or vacate. How much? Graham asked. What's the offer? $4,000. 1,000 more than we owe. Mara's laugh was hollow, desperate. Might as well be $1 million. We can't raise that kind of money in a week. We can't raise it in a year. Elena had tears streaming down her face now, no longer trying to hide them. It's over. After everything. After Papa. After the selling and the struggling and bringing you here. It's just over. The despair in her voice cut Lucas to the core. He looked at Graham, saw the same helpless frustration mirrored in his friend's face. They'd been here 3 days. 3 days of fence mending and well fixing and careful conversation. 3 days of hope building fragile and tentative between 4 people who needed each other. And now this. There has to be something we can do, Lucas said, knowing even as he spoke that he was grasping at smoke. Some way to fight this. Fight with what? Mara's voice was empty, all the fire burned out of it. We have no money, no leverage, no time. The bank owns us. This buyer owns us. We're done. She turned and walked back toward the house, her steps mechanical, a woman moving through shock. Elena lingered a moment longer, her eyes finding Lucas's. I'm sorry, she whispered. I brought you all this way for nothing. I hoped. Her voice broke. I'm so sorry. Then she too was gone, following her sister back to the house that would soon belong to someone else. Lucas and Graham stood alone by the well house, the Montana wind cutting through them with indifferent cold. We have to do something, Lucas said. Graham, we can't just... I know. Graham's jaw was set in a hard line, the same expression he wore when making impossible decisions. But what? We don't have $4,000. We don't have 400. There has to be a way. A loan, maybe. Or we could, Lucas stopped, an idea forming. A terrible, desperate idea. The family money. Graham's head snapped toward him. Lucas, my brother's letter. It mentioned my trust. The money my grandfather left me. I've never touched it because touching it meant giving in, meant admitting I was still part of that life. The words came faster now, urgent and reckless. But it's there. It's been sitting in a bank back east for 6 years. It's enough. That money's yours. For your future. This is my future. Lucas gestured at the ranch, the mountains, the big sky overhead. This place, these women, this chance to be someone other than who I was born to be. If I don't use that money now, there won't be anything left to have a future in. If you access that trust, your family will know where you are. They'll come for you. Let them come, I'll deal with it then. Lucas was already moving, heading toward the bunkhouse. I need to send a telegram, figure out how to get the funds transferred. Graham, this can work. This can actually work. Graham caught his arm, stopping him. Lucas, think about what you're doing. Once you use that money, you're making a choice. You're choosing this place, these people, over your family, over everything you left behind. I know. Do you? Because there's no going back from this. Your brother made that clear. This is final. Lucas met his friend's eyes steadily. Then it's final. I'd rather have no family than live my whole life as someone I'm not. I'd rather have this... He gestured at the ranch again, at the house where 2 women were grieving their loss, then spend another minute pretending to want something I don't. Graham studied him for a long moment, then nodded slowly. All right, but we do this smart. We find out who this buyer is, what they're planning. We make sure there's no other option before you burn that bridge. There is no other option. Maybe not, but we look anyway. Agreed? Agreed. They went to the house together, finding Mara and Elena in the kitchen. Mara stood at the window, staring out at nothing. Elena sat at the table, her hands wrapped around a cup of tea she wasn't drinking. We're not giving up, Graham said without preamble. Mara turned slowly. Mr. Hale, I appreciate the sentiment, but we have a plan. He looked at Lucas, who nodded. It's not perfect, and it's going to require trust. But we think we can raise the money. Elena's head snapped up. How? That's complicated. Lucas pulled out a chair, sitting across from her. But first we need information. This buyer, who are they? What do they want with Red Hollow? The writer didn't say. Just that they were offering $4,000 cash and wanted a fast close. That's suspicious, Graham said. No one pays over asking price unless they want something specific. Either there's something valuable here you don't know about, or they have another reason for wanting you gone. Mara's eyes narrowed. Like what? Water rights, maybe? Or mineral deposits? Or they want to consolidate the land with neighboring properties? Graham was thinking out loud now, his military training showing in how he analyzed the situation. Do you have any neighbors who've been pressuring you to sell? The Crawfords to the east have mentioned it a few times. Casual-like, but persistent. Mara crossed her arms, thinking. And there's the mining company that's been surveying in the mountains. They approached Papa last year about access rights, but he refused. Mining company, Lucas repeated. That could be it. If there's ore on your land or they need to cross it to reach ore elsewhere, they'd want to control the property. But we don't know if that's true, Elena said. And even if it is, what difference does it make? We still can't match $4,000. We can. Lucas took a breath, committing to the madness. I have access to funds, family money I've never touched. It's enough to cover the debt and the buyer's offer. The sister stared at him. You have $4,000, Mara said flatly. And you're working as a mail-order husband on a failing ranch in Montana. I have my reasons, which you still haven't shared. Mara's voice was hard again, suspicious. Why would you give us that kind of money? What do you want in return? Nothing you're not already offering, a place to stay, work that matters, a chance to… Lucas stopped, searching for words. A chance to be part of something real instead of something expected. That's not an answer. It's the only one I have right now. Lucas met her gaze without flinching. Miss Whitlock, Mara, I know you don't trust me. I know this seems too good to be true, but I'm offering anyway. Let me send that telegram. Let me access those funds, save Red Hollow. And then what? We're in debt to you instead of the bank? No debt. Consider it an investment, a partnership like the letter promised. He glanced at Elena, saw hope warring with fear in her expression. Let us help you. Mara was quiet for so long Lucas thought she might refuse. Then, finally, she nodded once. One condition, you tell us the truth. All of it. Why you're here, what you're running from, why you have money you've never used. If we're going to trust you with our home, we need to know who you really are. Lucas felt Graham tense beside him. This was it. The moment of truth they'd both been avoiding. Tell the sisters everything and risk judgment, or deflect again and lose their trust entirely. He chose truth. My family owns textile mills back east, 4 of them. My grandfather built the business from nothing, and my father expanded it. I was supposed to take over eventually, was groomed for it my whole life. The words came easier now that he'd started. But I hated it. Hated the factory floors and the business meetings and the way we made money off other people's labor while pretending we were doing them a favor. So I left. Walked away from everything, the business, the money, the life they'd planned for me. And came west, Elena said softly. And came west. Worked cattle ranches, logging camps, anywhere that would have me. Tried to figure out who I was when no one was telling me who to be. He rubbed his face, tired of secrets. But my family won't let me go. They keep writing, keep asking me to come back. My father's sick, my brother's getting married, and they want me there. Want me to stop running and accept my responsibilities. Is that what the letters are about? Elena asked. The ones you burn? Lucas nodded. Every time we get close to somewhere, another one finds me. Like they're tracking me, waiting for me to finally give up and go home. So why don't you? Mara's voice was curious now, not accusatory. If they want you that badly, if there's money and security and family waiting, why keep running? Because it's not my life. It's the life they chose for me. And if I go back, if I use that money, they'll see it as surrender, as proof that I couldn't make it on my own. He met Mara's eyes. But this, helping you, this is different. This is choosing to use those resources for something that matters to me, something I want to fight for. The kitchen was silent except for the wind outside and the ticking of a clock on the mantel. Lucas could feel his heart beating too fast, could feel the weight of his confession hanging in the air. Finally, Elena spoke. That's incredibly brave. It's incredibly stupid, Mara countered, but her voice had softened. You're going to destroy your relationship with your family. For people you barely know. For a ranch you've been at for 3 days. Yes, Lucas said simply. I am. Mara shook her head, but Lucas saw something like respect in her eyes. You're both insane, you know that? Probably, Graham agreed. But we're committed insane. That counts for something. Despite everything, the deadline, the desperation, the impossible situation, Elena laughed. It was a small sound, surprised and genuine, and it seemed to crack something in the tension that had filled the room. All right, Mara said finally. All right. Lucas, send your telegram. Graham, see what you can find out about this buyer and what they really want. Elena and I will go through Papa's papers, see if there's anything about mineral rights or surveys we missed. She looked at each of them in turn. We have 7 days. Let's not waste them. They scattered to their tasks, and for the first time since the rider had arrived, Lucas felt something other than despair. He felt purpose. That night, as darkness settled over Red Hollow, like a blanket, Lucas sat in the bunkhouse composing his telegram. Graham lay in his bunk, pretending to read but actually watching Lucas struggle with each word. How do you tell your family you're choosing strangers over them? Lucas asked the darkness. You don't, Graham said. You just make the choice and live with the consequences. Lucas finished the telegram, brief and businesslike, requesting immediate transfer of funds to the Montana Territorial Bank, and folded it carefully. Tomorrow, he'd ride to town, send it, and set in motion events he couldn't undo. Tomorrow, he'd burn the last bridge home. In the main house, Mara and Elena prepared for bed in their separate rooms. But before Elena could close her door, Mara appeared in the hallway. Do you trust them? Mara asked quietly. Elena considered the question honestly. I don't know, but I think I want to. Does that count? It's a start. Mara hesitated, then added, You did the right thing, sending that letter, bringing them here. I was angry, but you were right. Say that again? Elena smiled. I want to remember this moment. Don't push it. But Mara was almost smiling too. Get some sleep. Tomorrow we fight back. Elena closed her door, and for the first time in weeks, she went to bed without crying. Outside her window, the stars burned cold and distant, and the land waited to see what morning would bring. 7 days, 1 week. Everything depended on what they could build, salvage, or save in the hours between now and then. It would have to be enough. Dawn broke gray and cold over Red Hollow, but Lucas was already gone. Graham found the note tucked under the coffee pot in the bunkhouse, Lucas's handwriting barely legible in the pre-dawn darkness when he must have written it. Riding to town early. Need to get this done before I lose my nerve. Back by afternoon. Don't let them worry. Too late for that, Graham thought, folding the note and tucking it in his pocket. He'd heard Lucas leave around 4 in the morning, heard the quiet sounds of a man trying not to wake anyone as he saddled a horse and rode out into darkness. Graham had almost called out, almost stopped him, but something in the careful silence of Lucas's movements suggested this was a thing he needed to do alone. Now Graham stood in the cold morning air, watching smoke rise from the main house chimney, and wondered how to explain Lucas's absence without revealing the enormity of what his friend was about to do. Burn his family bridges, access money that would announce his location to everyone he'd been hiding from, commit himself irrevocably to this place and these people he barely knew. The kitchen door opened and Mara stepped out, already dressed for work, her father's coat pulled tight against the wind. She saw Graham standing there and immediately scanned the yard. "Where's Lucas?" "Town, sending the telegram." Graham watched her face carefully, looking for doubt or second thoughts. "He left early, wanted it done." Mara nodded slowly, processing this. "And once he sends it? Once the money's in motion? Then there's no going back. His family will know where he is. They'll come looking, probably. Try to talk him into returning." Graham paused. "Or try to force him." "Can they do that? Force him? Legally? No. He's a grown man making his own choices." Graham's jaw tightened. "But families have ways of applying pressure that don't involve the law, guilt, obligation, making you feel like you're destroying everything and everyone by wanting something different." Mara studied him with those sharp eyes that seemed to see too much. "You speaking from experience, Mr. Hale?" "We all have families we've disappointed, Miss Whitlock." "Is that what's in that document you carry? The one you hide in your pack but check on every night like you're afraid it'll vanish?" She crossed her arms. "I'm not blind. I see you take it out, look at it, put it back. Whatever it says, it weighs on you." Graham felt his face heat despite the cold. He'd been careful, or thought he had been, but apparently not careful enough. "It's military discharge papers. Dishonorable. For refusing orders." The words came out harder than he intended, defensive and sharp. He waited for judgment, for the inevitable questions about cowardice and duty and honor. Instead, Mara just nodded. "What were the orders?" "Excuse me?" "The orders you refused. What were they?" Graham hesitated. He'd told this story before, or tried to. But no one had ever asked that specific question. They'd asked why he'd refused, or what he'd been thinking, or how he could live with the shame, but never what the actual orders had been. "There was a settlement," he said finally. "Mostly women and children, some old men. They were harboring someone we wanted, a resistance fighter who'd killed 3 of our soldiers. My commanding officer ordered me to go in hard, make an example, burn them out if necessary to get our man." The memories came back sharp and bitter. "I looked at those faces, those children, and I knew what make an example meant, knew what burning them out would require. So I refused. And they discharged you for it. Dishonorably. Branded me a coward, and made sure everyone knew it. Couldn't get work on any military post, couldn't get references, couldn't go anywhere without that paper following me." He met her eyes. "So I understand what Lucas is doing, what it costs to walk away from what you're supposed to be." Mara was quiet for a long moment, the wind pulling strands of dark hair from her braid. "You think you made the right choice? Refusing those orders?" "I know I did. Even though it cost you everything? Especially because of that?" Graham's voice was steady, certain. "Some things are worth more than a career, more than reputation. I'd make the same choice again tomorrow." Something shifted in Mara's expression, a softening that transformed her face. "My father would have liked you, I think. He used to say that character isn't what you do when it's easy. It's what you do when every choice is hard, and you still pick the right thing anyway." She uncrossed her arms, shoving her hands in her coat pockets. "Come on, let's get the morning chores done. Elena's making breakfast, and we have 6 days left to figure out how to save this place." They worked through the morning in companionable silence, falling into a rhythm that felt natural despite having known each other less than a week. Graham mucked stalls while Mara fed the remaining livestock. Together they hauled water, checked fences, and did the 1,000 small tasks that kept a ranch functioning. By the time they finished, the sun had climbed higher and Elena was calling them in for food. The kitchen smelled of coffee and frying bacon, a luxury Elena had insisted on despite their dwindling supplies. "If we're going to fight," she'd declared that morning, "we're going to do it on full stomachs." Now she set plates on the table with a determined cheerfulness that didn't quite hide her worry. Her eyes kept drifting to the window, watching for Lucas's return. "He'll be fine," Graham said gently. "The town's not far. He probably stopped to ask questions, gather information about this mysterious buyer." "Or he's having second thoughts," Elena said quietly, "realizing what he's giving up and deciding we're not worth it." "Elena," Mara's voice was sharp, Don't Don't what? Don't think about the obvious. He's sacrificing his entire future for people he barely knows, for a ranch that might fail anyway. What if he gets to town and realizes how insane this is? Then he comes back and tells us so, Graham said, and we find another way. But I know Lucas. Once he commits to something, he sees it through. He'll send that telegram. You can't be sure. No, Graham admitted, but I choose to believe it anyway. Sometimes that's all you can do. Choose to trust until someone proves you shouldn't. Elena absorbed this, then nodded slowly. They ate in silence, each lost in their own thoughts, until the sound of hoofbeats outside brought all three of them to their feet. Lucas appeared in the doorway, wind-burned and exhausted, but grinning. It's done. Telegram sent, funds requested. Clerk said it'll take 3 days for the transfer to complete, maybe 4. We should have the money by Friday. The relief in the room was palpable. Elena actually sagged against the counter, one hand pressed to her chest. Mara closed her eyes briefly, something that might have been prayer or just desperate gratitude crossing her face. Any problems? Graham asked. None. Clerk was professional, didn't ask questions. Money should transfer clean. Lucas pulled out a chair and dropped into it heavily. But I did learn something interesting while I was in town. About the buyer? Mara was suddenly alert, focused. Better. About who's pushing this sale. Lucas accepted the coffee Elena poured him with a grateful nod. Ran into the land office clerk at the general store, got him talking about recent transactions, big purchases, that sort of thing. Turns out there's been a lot of activity lately. Small ranches being bought up, water rights consolidated, all by the same entity. The mining company, Graham guessed. Close. A development company out of Denver called Territorial Holdings. They've been buying land all through this valley for the past 6 months, always through intermediaries, always pushing for fast closures. Lucas leaned forward, warming to his story. And here's the interesting part. The company's president is Marcus Crawford. Mara's face went pale. Robert Crawford's son. Your neighbor, Graham said, connecting the pieces. The one who's been asking about buying your land. Not just asking, pressuring. Mara's voice was tight with controlled anger. Papa told me about it before he died. Said Marcus had been sniffing around for years, making offers, getting more aggressive each time we refused. But I didn't know he'd started a company. Didn't know he was buying up the whole valley. Why would he want it so badly? Elena asked. What's out here that's worth all this effort? Water, Mara said suddenly. It has to be water. The river that runs through our property feeds half the valley. If someone controlled Red Hollow, they'd control water access for every ranch downstream. Graham nodded slowly. And with climate getting drier, with more people moving west, water rights are becoming more valuable than gold. Whoever controls the water controls everything. So Marcus is using the bank to force us out, Mara said, working through it. We're in debt, we're vulnerable, and he knows it. Put pressure on the bank to call in the loan early, make an offer that looks generous but is really just theft. Once he has Red Hollow, he has leverage over everyone else. It's smart, Lucas said grudgingly. Ruthless, but smart. Buy up small properties, consolidate them into one large holding, control the resources. In 10 years, he'd own half of Montana. Not if we stop him. Mara's voice was hard as iron. Not if we match his offer and force the bank to honor our debt. He can't take what we won't sell. Can he contest it? Elena asked, worried. If he finds out we're matching his offer, could he go higher? Keep raising the price until we can't keep up. Maybe. But by then we'll have time to figure out our options, get legal help if we need it. Mara looked at Lucas with an expression Graham couldn't quite read. Thank you for doing this, for choosing us over them. Lucas met her eyes steadily. I haven't just chosen you over them. I've chosen myself over them. This is the first time in my life I'm using that money for something I actually want. That matters. Still, Elena said softly, it's a gift. Whatever your reasons, it's a gift we can never fully repay. Don't want repayment. Want a home. Want work that matters. Want... Lucas stopped, his cheeks coloring slightly. Want to stop running and start building something. The moment stretched between them, waited with meaning until Graham cleared his throat. So we have a plan. Money comes through Friday, we pay off the bank, and we tell Marcus Crawford and his development company to go to hell."
Eloquently put, Mara said dryly, but she was almost smiling. "In the meantime, we keep working, keep this place running, and we watch our backs. If Crawford's been pressuring other ranchers, he won't take kindly to us blocking his plans." "You think he'd try something?" Elena's voice rose with alarm. "I think desperate men do desperate things, and a man who's been building an empire won't let one stubborn ranch stand in his way without a fight." Mara stood, squaring her shoulders. "But we're not alone anymore. There's 4 of us now. That counts for something."
The next 3 days passed in a blur of work and waiting. Graham finished repairing the well pump, then moved on to shoring up the barn roof. Lucas worked alongside him, the two of them developing a rhythm born of years of friendship and shared labor. Below them, Mara and Elena went through their father's papers systematically, documenting everything related to water rights and property boundaries. On the 3rd night, Lucas received another letter. Graham watched him read it by lamplight in the bunkhouse, saw his friend's face go through a progression of emotions: surprise, guilt, anger, resignation. When Lucas finally set the letter down, his hands were shaking. "Let me guess," Graham said. "Your family." "My father." Lucas's voice was hollow. "He knows about the telegram. Knows I accessed the trust. He's not well, Graham. My brother says he's declining faster than expected. They want me home before—" He couldn't finish the sentence. "Before he dies." "Yeah." Lucas scrubbed his face with both hands. "My brother says if I don't come now, I'll regret it forever. That some choices can't be unmade. That family is family, no matter how far you run." Graham didn't know what to say to that. He'd never had much family to speak of, never felt the pull of blood obligation that seemed to haunt Lucas. "What are you going to do?" "I don't know. I should go. I know I should go. But if I leave now, before the money comes through, before we know Red Hollow is safe—" Lucas looked up, his eyes tormented. "What if I'm trading one guilt for another? What if I go home and my father dies anyway, and I've abandoned the one thing I actually chose for myself?" "There's no good answer here." "No, there isn't." Lucas folded the letter carefully, like he'd folded all the others. "But I'm staying, at least until Friday. At least until I know the money came through and the ranch is secure. After that, I'll figure it out." Lucas: "Don't, Graham. Don't tell me I'm making a mistake or that I'll regret it or any of the things I'm already telling myself." His voice broke slightly. "Just let me make this choice and live with it. That's all I can do." Graham nodded, respecting his friend's pain even if he couldn't fully understand it. They sat in silence for a while, listening to the night sounds of the ranch, until Lucas spoke again. "Elena asked me today if I believed in fate." "What'd you tell her?" "That I didn't know. That maybe we make our own fate by the choices we make, the things we're willing to fight for." Lucas laughed softly. "She said that was very philosophical for a man who'd rather act than think." "She's not wrong." "No, she's not." Lucas looked at the letter again, then at Graham. "I'm falling for her, for Elena. Probably have been since the first day, though I was too stupid to realize it. And now I'm facing the possibility of choosing between her and my dying father, and there's no world where that doesn't destroy me." "Then don't choose yet. Take it day by day. Sometimes that's all you can do. Survive until tomorrow, and hope it gets clearer." It was advice Graham had given himself many times. Advice that had gotten him through the darkest days after his discharge. It wasn't comfort, exactly, but it was truth. And sometimes truth was all you had. Friday arrived with agonizing slowness. Mara and Lucas rode to town at first light, leaving Graham and Elena to manage the ranch. They waited anxiously through the morning, through the afternoon, hope and dread trading places with every passing hour. When the riders finally appeared on the horizon, Graham and Elena rushed out to meet them. One look at Mara's face told them everything they needed to know. "The money came through," she said, dismounting in one smooth motion. "All of it. We paid off the debt, settled with the bank, and told them we're keeping Red Hollow." Elena let out a cry of relief and joy, throwing her arms around Lucas, who caught her with a surprised laugh. Graham allowed himself a smile, feeling the knot of tension in his chest finally loosen. "What did the bank say?" he asked. "They weren't happy," Lucas reported, especially when they had to inform Marcus Crawford that his offer was no longer needed. Apparently he was there, waiting to sign papers, expecting us to fail. "How did he take it?" Elena asked, still holding on to Lucas. "About as well as you'd expect. Made some threats, said we'd regret this, implied this wasn't over." Mara's voice was calm, but her eyes were hard. "But the law's on our side now. We own Red Hollow free and clear. He can't touch us." "Unless he finds another way," Graham said quietly. "Unless that." Mara turned to look at her ranch, at the land that was finally, truly theirs again. "But we'll face that when it comes. Right now, I just want to breathe for a minute, to feel what it's like to not be drowning." They stood together in the yard as the sun began its descent. 4 people who'd been strangers a week ago and now were… what? Friends? Partners? Family? Maybe all of those things. Maybe none of them yet. But they'd fought together, survived together, and that had to count for something. That night they celebrated with a proper dinner, chicken Elena had been saving, vegetables from the root cellar, even a pie made from preserved apples. They ate until they were full, drank coffee until they were restless with it, and talked about the future with something that felt dangerously like hope. "We need to hire hands," Mara said, pushing her empty plate away. "Can't run this place with just 4 people. Come spring, we'll need help with calving, branding, all of it." "Where will we find them?" Elena asked. "And how will we pay them?" "We have some cushion now, after settling the debt. Not much, but enough to offer fair wages for the season. As for finding them…" Mara looked at Graham and Lucas. "You 2 have worked ranches before. You must know people. Men looking for work who won't ask too many questions about the owners." "I know a few," Lucas said. "Good workers who move around a lot. I can write to them, see who's available." "Do it. We'll need at least 3 more men, maybe 4. Mara was already planning, her mind moving through logistics. "Graham, that barn roof, how long before it's secure?" "Another week of good weather, 2 if it rains. Make it your priority. Elena and I will work on the house, fix what we can before winter really sets in." She looked around the table at the faces that had become familiar so quickly. "We're really doing this. We're really going to make this work." "We're going to try," Graham corrected gently. "That's all anyone can do." The evening wound down slowly, everyone reluctant to break the spell of peace that had settled over them. Eventually, Elena and Mara retreated to the house, leaving Graham and Lucas in the bunkhouse. Lucas lay in his bunk, staring at the ceiling, the letter from his brother burning a hole in his pocket. He should write back, should explain his choice, try to make them understand. But what words could possibly convey the complexity of what he felt? How could he explain that he was choosing life over obligation, present over past, hope over guilt? "You should go see him," Graham said into the darkness. "My father?" "Yeah, before he dies. Before you have to live with never saying goodbye." Graham propped himself up on one elbow, looking over at his friend. "The money's through. The ranch is secure. You can take a few weeks, go home, make your peace, then come back if that's what you still want." "What if I can't come back? What if they convince me to stay?" "Then that's your choice too. But at least you'll have made it consciously, not by default." Graham lay back down. "Besides, Elena would want you to go. She's not the kind of woman who'd ask you to abandon your dying father for her. That's not love, Lucas. That's selfishness." Lucas knew Graham was right, knew it in his bones, even as everything in him wanted to refuse. He'd found something here at Red Hollow. Purpose, belonging, maybe even love. Leaving, even temporarily, felt like inviting disaster, like the universe would see his absence as permission to take it all away. But his father was dying, and some debts had to be paid, no matter the cost. "I'll think about it," he said finally. "Don't think too long." They fell silent, 2 men wrestling with their own demons in the darkness, until sleep finally claimed them both. The confrontation came 3 days later. Graham was on the barn roof, hammering in new shingles, when he saw the riders approaching. 6 of them, riding hard, led by a man on a black gelding who carried himself with the arrogance of someone used to getting his way. "Mara," Graham called, climbing down the ladder fast. "We have visitors." Mara emerged from the house, Elena behind her, both women wiping their hands on aprons. Lucas appeared from the corral, pitchfork in hand, his expression darkening as he recognized the lead rider. "Marcus Crawford," Mara said quietly, "and his men." The riders pulled up in the yard, their horses stamping and blowing. Marcus Crawford was maybe 40, handsome in a cold way, with pale eyes and a mouth that curved easily into cruelty. He looked down at Mara with barely concealed contempt. "Miss Whitlock, I hear congratulations are in order. You managed to scrape together enough money to keep your little ranch." His tone made it clear he thought it was anything but congratulations worthy. "Mr. Crawford, what can I do for you?" "You can listen, and listen carefully." Marcus dismounted, his men staying on their horses, hands resting casually on their gun belts. "You've made a very foolish mistake. That money you paid the bank, it won't be enough. This ranch is finished, Miss Whitlock. It's only a matter of time." "Is that a threat?" Graham asked, moving to stand beside Mara. Marcus's eyes flicked to him dismissively. "It's a fact. This valley is changing, and those who can't change with it will be swept aside. I'm offering you one last chance. Sell to me now, for a fair price, and walk away with your dignity intact." "We're not selling," Mara said flatly. "Then you're fools." Marcus's voice hardened. "I've bought up 6 ranches in this valley already, 6 families who are smart enough to take my offer and start fresh somewhere else. You're surrounded, Miss Whitlock, isolated. When I control the water rights upstream and downstream, when I decide what flows through your property, you'll come begging to sell. And by then, my offer won't be nearly as generous." "You can't control water rights you don't own," Elena said, her voice shaking but determined. "The river runs through our land. That gives us rights. For now. But laws change, Miss Whitlock. Politicians can be persuaded. And I have resources you can't even imagine." Marcus smiled, cold and sharp. "This isn't over. Not by a long shot. You've won a battle, but the war? That's just beginning." He remounted in one smooth motion, looking down at them from his horse. "I'll give you 1 month. 1 month to realize how isolated you are, how hard winter is going to be, how impossible it is to run a ranch with no allies and no help. When you're ready to be reasonable, send word. I might still be interested." Then he wheeled his horse and rode out, his men following, leaving only dust and threat hanging in the air. Nobody spoke for a long moment. Then Lucas said what they were all thinking. "He's not going to let this go." "No," Mara agreed. "He's not." She looked at Graham, at Lucas, at her sister. "So we'd better be ready, because he's right about one thing. This is just the beginning." That night, as they sat around the kitchen table planning their defense, strategizing how to survive a siege they couldn't quite define yet, Graham realized something fundamental had shifted. They weren't 4 strangers anymore, bound by contracts and convenience. They were allies, partners. And maybe, just maybe, they were becoming something even more important than that. They were becoming family. The first snow came that night, silent and relentless. Graham woke to an unfamiliar quiet, that peculiar muffled quality that only comes when the world is buried under white. He dressed quickly in the pre-dawn darkness and stepped outside to find Red Hollow transformed. 6 inches had fallen during the night, softening every harsh edge, making the struggling ranch look almost peaceful in the gray light. Almost. But peace was an illusion when men like Marcus Crawford were circling. He was shoveling a path to the barn when Mara emerged from the house, her breath clouding in the frigid air. She stopped at the porch rail, surveying the snow with an expression that wasn't quite worry, but wasn't quite relief either. "Winter's here early," she said. "Looks like it." Graham paused in his work, leaning on the shovel. "That a problem?" "Everything's a problem lately," but her voice held a note of wry humor. "Though I suppose snow we can deal with. It's the other things that keep me up at night." She meant Crawford, though she didn't say his name. They'd all been thinking about him constantly since his visit 3 days ago, turning his threats over in their minds, looking for weaknesses they could exploit or defenses they could build. So far, they'd come up with nothing concrete, just a vague sense of waiting for the other boot to drop. Lucas appeared in the barn doorway, hay stuck in his hair and a smudge of dirt across his cheek. "Horses are fed, cows milked. Found a weak board in the back stall, but patched it temporary-like. Should hold until spring. Thank you. Mara descended the steps carefully, her boots crunching in the fresh snow. Graham, once you're done here, Elena could use help moving those supply crates we bought yesterday. They're too heavy for her to manage alone. It was the kind of domestic task that shouldn't have mattered, shouldn't have felt significant. But Graham found himself nodding, pleased to be included in the household rhythms, to be trusted with small responsibilities that meant they saw him as permanent rather than temporary. They worked through the morning, all four of them, tackling the endless list of tasks that winter demanded. Splitting more wood, checking the animals for signs of cold stress, reinforcing the chicken coop against predators that would be getting desperate as food grew scarce. It was hard work, the kind that left your muscles aching and your breath short, but there was satisfaction in it too, in seeing immediate results, and knowing that each task completed was one more defense against the season's cruelty. Around noon, Elena called them in for lunch. Soup made from yesterday's bones and some of the preserved vegetables from the cellar. They ate quickly, still cold from the morning's work, grateful for the warmth of the kitchen and the food in their bellies. I've been thinking, Elena said as she refilled coffee cups, about what Mr. Crawford said, about us being isolated, having no allies. He wasn't wrong, Mara admitted reluctantly. We've always kept to ourselves. Papa believed in being self-sufficient, not asking for help. It worked when times were good, but now it's a weakness, Lucas finished. Easy to pressure someone who's alone. Harder when they have friends watching their back. So we make friends. Elena sat down, warming her hands on her cup. The other ranchers in the valley, the ones who haven't sold to Crawford yet, they're probably feeling the same pressure we are. Maybe if we reached out, formed some kind of alliance. They might see us as competition, Mara said. Or worse, as troublemakers who'll draw Crawford's attention to them too. Or they might see us as exactly what Elena said, potential allies. Graham leaned forward, interested. Think about it. Crawford's been buying up properties systematically. Everyone in this valley has to know they might be next. Strength in numbers makes sense. Worth a try at least, Lucas agreed. Worst case, they say no, and we're no worse off than we are now. Mara looked between the three of them, something like hope flickering in her eyes. The Hendersons have a place about 10 miles north. Good people, or they were last time Papa talked to them. And the Yamamotos to the south. They run sheep, but they've always been fair neighbors. I'll ride to the Hendersons tomorrow, Graham offered. Feel them out, see if they're interested in talking. I'll go with you, Mara said. They know me, know I'm not the type to waste their time. Between us, we might actually convince them. There was something in the way she said between us that made Graham's chest tighten, a casual assumption of partnership, of shared purpose, as if they'd moved beyond strangers helping strangers and into something more permanent, more real. The afternoon brought more snow and the first letter. Lucas found it when he went to check the horses, tucked into the barn door frame where anyone could have put it. No envelope, no signature, just a few lines written in careful block letters. Sell now while you can. Accidents happen in winter. Nobody will help you when they come. He brought it to the house without comment, laying it on the kitchen table where Mara and Graham were discussing supply lists. Elena, coming in from the cold room with her arms full of canning jars, saw their faces and immediately knew something was wrong. What is it? A warning. Mara's voice was flat as she read the note. Or a threat, depending on how you look at it. Crawford. Graham didn't make it a question. Who else? Mara crumpled the paper, her jaw tight. He said we'd come begging within a month. Looks like he's not interested in waiting that long. What kind of accidents? Elena asked, fear creeping into her voice. What does that mean? Could mean anything. Lucas moved to the window, scanning the snowy landscape as if expecting to see Crawford's men lurking in the tree line. Fires, stampedes, contaminated water. Sabotage comes in a lot of forms, and most of them are hard to prove. So what do we do? Elena set down the jars with hands that shook slightly. We can't fight something we can't see coming. We stay vigilant, Graham said. We don't leave the ranch unattended. We check everything twice, fences, feed, water sources. And we document everything strange or suspicious.
If Crawford's men try something, we want evidence. Evidence doesn't mean much out here, Mara said bitterly. Law's thin on the ground in Montana territory. By the time we could prove Crawford did something, we'd already be destroyed. Then we make sure there's nothing to destroy. Lucas turned from the window, his expression hard. We fortify, we prepare, and we make it clear that we're not easy targets.
They spent the rest of the afternoon doing exactly that. Graham and Lucas rode the fence lines, checking for cuts or weaknesses that might let cattle out or predators in. Mara and Elena went through their supplies, taking inventory of everything from ammunition to medical supplies, making lists of what they'd need if they were truly under siege. As darkness fell and they gathered for supper, the mood was somber. The easy camaraderie of the morning had been replaced by tension, by the awareness that they were now in a different kind of fight, one without clear rules or certain outcomes. "I should go," Lucas said suddenly, breaking the silence, "to see my father, before this gets worse." Everyone looked at him. "What brought this on?" Graham asked carefully. "That letter, that threat." Lucas pushed his food around his plate without eating. "If something happens here, if Crawford makes good on his warnings, I don't want to be torn between protecting this place and honoring my father while I still can. Better to go now, make my peace, come back ready to stand my ground." "Lucas, you don't have to," Elena started, but he cut her off gently. "I do, though. Graham was right the other night. Some debts can't be ignored, no matter how much we want to. My father's dying. I need to see him before it's too late. Need to explain why I made the choices I made." He looked at Elena directly. "And need to make sure that when I come back here, if you'll have me, there's nothing pulling me away again." "If I'll have you," Elena's voice was soft, surprised. "Lucas, of course we all want you here. This is your home now, too." "Is it?" Lucas smiled sadly. "Or is it just a place I'm running to, same as all the others? I need to know the difference, need to face what I left behind before I can truly commit to what's ahead." Mara was watching him with an expression Graham couldn't quite read. "How long would you be gone?" 2 weeks, maybe 3. Depends on trains and weather and—" He swallowed hard. "And how long my father has. Could be I get there and he's already gone. Could be I stay for the funeral and then I'm back before the month's out." "Or you could stay," Mara said quietly. "Take over the family business. Honor your father's wishes. It would be understandable, Lucas. Expected, even." "I'm not going to stay." Lucas's voice was firm, certain. "I'm going to say goodbye, to make my peace, and then I'm coming back here. To Red Hollow. To all of you. Because this—" He gestured at the kitchen, the ranch beyond, the life they were building together. "This is what I choose. Not what I was born into or what's expected of me. What I actually want." Elena's eyes were bright with tears she wouldn't let fall. "When would you leave?" "Tomorrow. First light. The sooner I go, the sooner I'm back." He looked at Graham. "You'll watch out for them? Like they were my own family." "They are family," Lucas said simply. "That's the whole point." The next morning came too quickly. Lucas packed light, just a bedroll, a change of clothes, and the letters from his brother folded carefully in his coat pocket. The snow had stopped overnight, but the air was bitter cold, the kind that stung your lungs with each breath. Elena insisted on making him breakfast before he left, though no one ate much. The tension in the kitchen was thick enough to cut, everyone aware that this departure felt significant in ways they couldn't quite articulate. As if Lucas leaving, even temporarily, would somehow change the delicate balance they'd achieved. "You have money for the train?" Mara asked, ever practical. "Enough, and if I run short, my brother will cover it," Lucas smiled wryly. "One advantage to returning to the family. They'll pay for the privilege." "Right when you get there," Elena said. "Let us know you arrived safely." "I will." Lucas stood, pulling on his coat and hat. At the door he paused, looking back at the three of them. "Take care of each other. Watch for Crawford's men. And don't do anything stupid while I'm gone." "That's my line," Graham said, but he was smiling. Lucas clapped him on the shoulder, then did something that surprised everyone, including himself. He pulled Elena into a brief, fierce hug. "I'll be back," he whispered against her hair. I promise. Then he was gone, riding out into the cold dawn, leaving tracks in the snow that would be filled by noon. The ranch felt emptier without him, though they had only known him 2 weeks. Funny how quickly a person could become essential, Graham thought. How a stranger could become family in the time it took to mend a fence and save a ranch. He and Mara rode to the Hendersons' place that afternoon, leaving Elena to watch the ranch. The journey took 3 hours through snow that was already starting to freeze into treacherous ice. They rode in silence mostly, each lost in their own thoughts, until Mara finally spoke. Do you think he'll come back? Lucas? Yes. He gave his word. Words are easy. Following through is harder. Mara shifted in her saddle, adjusting her scarf against the wind. Especially when you're choosing one family over another. The guilt of that, it can change your mind. Graham glanced at her, hearing something personal in those words. Your father ever make you choose between him and something you wanted? No. He was good that way, supportive, even when he didn't understand my choices. Her voice softened with memory. But I watched other people struggle with it. Neighbors' kids who wanted to move to cities, marry people their parents didn't approve of, watched them tear themselves apart trying to honor everyone's expectations except their own. Is that why you never married? Didn't want to choose between your father and someone else? Mara laughed, short and sharp. No one asked, truthfully. I'm not exactly the kind of woman men dream about. Too independent, too opinionated, too willing to work alongside them instead of behind them. She paused. My father used to say I had the soul of a pioneer but lived in the wrong era. That 100 years ago, I would have thrived. Now I just exist. You do more than exist. You survive. You fight. You refuse to give up even when anyone reasonable would have quit months ago. Graham's voice was steady, certain. That's not a wrong era soul. That's just strength. Mara was quiet for a long moment. When she finally spoke, her voice was so soft he almost missed it. Thank you. For staying. For helping. For seeing something worth fighting for when everyone else just saw failure. I see a ranch worth saving and a woman worth knowing. That's enough. She looked at him then, really looked, and something passed between them. Recognition, maybe, or understanding. An acknowledgement that they were both people who'd been shaped by hard choices and harder consequences, and that maybe that made them well-suited to face whatever came next. The Hendersons' ranch appeared over the next rise, smoke curling from the chimney in the fading afternoon light. It was a modest operation, smaller than Red Hollow, but well-maintained with sturdy fences and buildings that spoke of care and attention. Jack Henderson met them at the door, a weathered man in his 50s with suspicious eyes and a rifle within easy reach. Mara Whitlock, heard your father passed. Condolences. Thank you, Mr. Henderson. This is Graham Hale. He's helping me run Red Hollow now. Henderson's eyes flicked to Graham, assessing. That right. Heard you had some hired help. Also heard you kept your ranch despite Marcus Crawford trying to buy it out from under you. News travels fast, Mar said. Always does, especially when it involves Crawford. Henderson's expression hardened. Come in out of the cold. We should talk. Inside, Henderson's wife Sarah poured coffee while their teenage son watched from the corner, curious and wary. They sat at a worn kitchen table that reminded Graham painfully of Red Hollow's. Same scars from years of use, same sense of being the heart of the household. Crawford came to see us 3 weeks ago, Henderson said without preamble. Made an offer on our land. Generous, on the surface. But something about it felt wrong, too eager, too pushy. When I asked for time to think it over, he got aggressive. Started talking about water rights and changing laws and how we'd regret not taking his offer while it was on the table. Did you take it? Mara asked. No. Told him this land's been in my family 40 years and wasn't for sale at any price. Henderson's jaw tightened. 2 days later, our north fence was cut, and we lost 15 head of cattle. Sheriff couldn't prove anything, but we all know who was responsible. He's trying to squeeze you out, Graham said. He's trying to squeeze everyone out. The Yamamotos got the same treatment, offer, refusal. Then their sheep grazing was contaminated with something that made half the flock sick. The Lewises lost their barn to a fire that started mysteriously in the middle of the night. Henderson looked at Mara directly. You stopped him from taking Red Hollow legally. That makes you a problem, and Crawford doesn't tolerate problems. So what do we do? Mara asked. Give up? Let him win? We fight back. Sarah Henderson spoke for the first time, her voice firm despite being soft-spoken. We band together, watch each other's backs, document every suspicious thing that happens. Crawford's powerful, but he's not invincible. If enough of us stand together, if we make enough noise, eventually someone has to listen. An alliance, Graham said. That's what we were thinking too. More than an alliance, a commitment. Henderson leaned forward. We agree to help each other, share resources, share labor, share information. Someone tries to sabotage one ranch, we all respond. Someone needs hands for calving or harvest, we all contribute. We make ourselves stronger together than we could ever be apart. It was exactly what they'd hoped to hear, and Graham saw relief flood Mara's face. You'd be willing to do that, even knowing it might make you more of a target? We're already targets, Sarah said. Might as well be targets who fight back. They spent the next hour working out details. How to communicate quickly, what resources each ranch could contribute, how to respond to various threats. By the time Graham and Mara left, they had commitments from the Hendersons to reach out to the Yamamotos and Lewises to start building a network of ranchers who refused to be picked off one by one. The ride back to Red Hollow felt lighter despite the growing darkness and dropping temperature. They'd taken the first real step toward fighting back, toward building something stronger than what Crawford could tear down. You're Mr. Hale, Mara said as they rode. He seems like a good man. Graham smiled. He's not my Mr. Hale. No? Mara's voice held a hint of teasing. Could have fooled me, the way you two look out for each other. We've been through things together that creates bonds. Graham glanced at her. Kind of like what's happening here. A few weeks ago, we were strangers. Now we're partners. Mara said it simply, without embellishment. In business, at least. Maybe in other ways too, eventually. If we survive long enough to find out. We'll survive, Graham said with more confidence than he felt. We're too stubborn to do anything else. They arrived home to find Elena in the kitchen, looking worried. There was another letter, pushed under the door while I was checking the animals. Graham read it aloud. 1 down, 3 to go. Winter's long. Accidents happen. 1 down, Mara repeated slowly. Lucas. They think because he left, we're weaker, more vulnerable. Are they wrong? Elena asked quietly. No, Graham admitted. We are weaker without him, at least in terms of numbers. But we're not helpless. And we have allies now. The Hendersons are with us. Others will follow. Crawford might think he's winning, but he's actually uniting the very people he wants to divide. I hope you're right. Elena took the letter, holding it like it might burn her. Because if you're not, if something happens before Lucas gets back. She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't have to. They all knew what she meant, that every day Lucas was gone felt like borrowed time, that they were 3 people trying to defend something that needed 4, that winter was long and full of opportunities for accidents that might not be accidents at all. That night, Graham took first watch, sitting by the window with a rifle across his lap and his discharge papers in his pocket. He'd pulled them out earlier, read them again in the lamplight. All those official words that said he was a coward, a failure, a man who broke when he should have stood firm. But he'd also read between the lines, seen the truth those words couldn't erase, that he'd chosen mercy over obedience, humanity over orders, conscience over career. And he'd make that choice again, every time, because some things mattered more than reputation. Like the ranch he was protecting now, like the women who slept trusting him to keep them safe, like the friend who'd ridden east to face his own demons, trusting Graham to hold things together until he returned. Graham had failed at being a good soldier, but maybe, just maybe, he could succeed at being a good man. The snow fell silent outside, and somewhere in the darkness, Marcus Crawford's men were probably plotting their next move. But inside Red Hollow, 3 people slept safe and warm, protected by someone who'd proven that the courage to refuse could be just as powerful as the courage to obey. And when morning came, they'd face whatever Crawford threw at them together. Because that's what partners did. That's what family did. And they were both now, whether they'd planned it or not. The telegram arrived on the 10th day of Lucas's absence. Graham was splitting wood behind the barn when he heard the horse approaching fast, too fast for a casual visitor. He dropped the axe and reached for the rifle he now kept within arm's reach, but relaxed slightly when he recognized the telegraph boy from town, a skinny kid named Daniel, who sometimes ran messages for extra money. "Mr. Hale!" Daniel called breathlessly, pulling his horse to a sliding stop. "Telegram for Miss Whitlock. Said it was urgent." Mara emerged from the house, wiping flour from her hands, Elena right behind her. Graham took the telegram, pressing a coin into Daniel's palm. "Stay for coffee? Warm up before you ride back?" "Can't, sir. Got 3 more deliveries before dark." "Thank you, though." The boy wheeled his horse and was gone, leaving only hoof prints in the week-old snow that had started to melt in patches. Mara opened the telegram with hands that weren't quite steady. Graham watched her face as she read, saw it go pale, then saw something that might have been relief or grief or both cross her features. "It's from Lucas," she said quietly. "His father passed 2 days ago. Funeral's tomorrow. He'll be home by the end of the week." Elena made a small sound of distress. "Oh, Lucas. He made it in time at least. That's something." "It is," Mara agreed, folding the telegram carefully. "And he said he's coming home. Not going home, coming home. Here, to Red Hollow." She looked at Graham. "He chose us." "He chose himself," Graham corrected gently. "And we happen to be part of that choice. But yes, he's coming back." The relief in the air was palpable. They'd functioned these past 10 days, had even made progress. The alliance with the Hendersons had held, with the Yamamotos and Lewises joining within days. They'd established a rotation where someone from each ranch checked on the others, looking for signs of sabotage or threat. It wasn't perfect, but it was something. A network where before there'd been isolation, but they'd also been operating one person short, stretching themselves thin, taking extra watch shifts that left them exhausted. And if Graham was honest, they'd all been wondering if Lucas would actually return, if the pull of family obligation and inheritance would prove stronger than the tentative bonds they'd formed here. Now they knew. He was coming back. "We should prepare," Elena said, already moving toward the house. "Make sure everything's in order for when he arrives. He'll be grieving, exhausted. He'll need us to be exactly what we've been," Mara interrupted. "No fussing, no special treatment. Just normal. Work and routine, and the knowledge that life here continued without falling apart." She smiled slightly. "That's what I'd want, anyway. Proof that my choice to come back mattered." Elena nodded slowly. "You're right. Of course you're right." She disappeared into the house, and Graham heard her moving around the kitchen with purpose, probably baking something because that's what Elena did when emotions ran high. Graham and Mara stood in the yard, the weak winter sun doing little to cut the cold. She was still holding the telegram, her thumb running over the words as if they might change or disappear. "I'm glad he got to say goodbye," she said softly, "to his father. Even if it hurt, even if it was hard, he won't have to live with the regret of not being there." "Is that experience talking?" Mara glanced at him. "My mother died when I was 16. She'd been sick for months, wasting away, and I couldn't stand to watch it. So I spent those last weeks avoiding her, making excuses, staying out with the horses or in the fields. Anything to not see what she was becoming." Her voice was steady, but her eyes were bright. "She died while I was in town, getting supplies. Papa said she asked for me at the end. I wasn't there." Graham didn't know what to say to that. Comfort seemed inadequate, platitudes insulting. So he just stood beside her, a solid presence, and let the silence speak for him. "I understand what Lucas is going through," Mara continued. "That guilt mixed with relief that it's finally over. That sense of having failed somehow, even when you know you did your best. It takes time to work through, to forgive yourself." She looked at Graham directly. "He'll need patience and space, and the knowledge that we don't judge him for whatever complicated feelings he's having. We can do that." "Can we? I'm not exactly known for my patience." Graham smiled. "Then we'll learn together. Seems like that's what we've been doing all along anyway." The moment stretched between them, comfortable and charged at the same time. Then Mara folded the telegram and tucked it in her coat pocket. Come on, that wood's not going to split itself, and we need enough to get through another week at least. They worked through the afternoon, falling into the rhythm they'd developed over the past weeks. Graham split, Mara stacked, and between them they managed to build a woodpile that would keep them warm through the worst of winter. It was hard work, the kind that left your shoulders burning and your hands raw, but it was also honest work, work that showed results, work that mattered. As the sun began its descent, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple, they heard riders approaching. Multiple horses this time, and Graham's hand went automatically to his rifle before he recognized Jack Henderson's distinctive gray mare. Henderson rode at the head of a group of 6 men, all neighbors from the alliance they'd formed. Behind them came a wagon loaded with supplies: lumber, nails, tools, sacks of grain, and flour. "Heard you might need some help," Henderson called out as they reached the yard. "Figured we'd bring reinforcements." Mara stared at the wagon, then at the men. "Mr. Henderson, we can't. This is too much." "It's not charity, it's mutual aid," Sarah Henderson said from the wagon seat where she sat bundled in blankets. "You helped us patrol our fence lines last week when Jack was sick. The Yamamotos brought us eggs when our chickens stopped laying. The Lewises helped the Yamamotos repair their barn after Crawford's men tried to burn it. This is how we survived, Mara. Together." Elena appeared from the house, her face lighting up at the sight of so many friendly faces. "Sarah! Everyone! Please come in. I just made coffee, and there's bread, and—" "We're not here to eat your food," Old Man Lewis said, climbing down from his horse with the stiffness of someone who'd spent too many years in the saddle. "We're here to work. That barn roof Graham mentioned last time we met. Let's see if we can't get it reinforced before the next snow hits." What followed was controlled chaos. The men swarmed the barn with ladders and tools, assessing, planning, executing with the efficiency of people who'd spent their lives fixing things. Sarah and Mrs. Yamamoto helped Elena in the kitchen, cooking enough food to feed an army. Mrs. Lewis, who turned out to be a retired school teacher, sat at the kitchen table with Mara going over accounts and suggesting ways to stretch their resources further. Graham worked alongside the other men, marveling at how quickly strangers could become comrades when united by common cause. They didn't just fix the barn roof, they reinforced the entire structure, replaced rotting boards, shored up the foundation. By the time darkness forced them to stop, the barn was solid in ways it hadn't been in years. They ate together, crowded around the kitchen table and spilling into the parlor, the house loud with conversation and laughter. It reminded Graham of army mess halls in the good days, before everything went wrong. That sense of camaraderie, of being part of something larger than yourself. As people began to leave, promising to return if needed, Henderson pulled Graham aside. "You should know, Crawford's been quiet lately, too quiet. Usually when he wants something, he pushes hard and fast, but he's been laying low for almost 2 weeks now. You think he's given up? I think he's planning something big, something that'll hit all of us at once, make an example so clear that everyone else will fall in line." Henderson's face was grim in the lamplight. "Keep your eyes open, and if you see anything suspicious, send word immediately. We'll come running." "Appreciate that. And Henderson, thank you for today, for all of it. Thank you for giving us a reason to stand together. Before you and Mara started this alliance, we were all isolated, easy targets. Now we're something else." Henderson clapped him on the shoulder. "Now we're a problem Crawford can't solve with intimidation and sabotage. That's worth celebrating." After everyone left, the house felt almost too quiet. Mara and Elena cleaned up while Graham did a final check of the perimeter, making sure everything was secure. When he returned, he found both sisters in the kitchen, exhausted but content. "That was a good day," Elena said, drying the last dish. "I'd forgotten what it felt like to have friends, to not be alone." "We haven't been alone since Graham and Lucas arrived," Mara pointed out. "But yes, having the neighbors here, it was nice. Reminded me of when Papa was alive and we used to host barn dances. The whole valley would come." "We could do that again," Elena said suddenly. "After Lucas gets back, after winter passes, have a celebration. Show Crawford that we're not just surviving, we're living." "One crisis at a time," Mara cautioned, but she was smiling. "Let's get through the next week first. Then we can plan parties."
That night, Graham lay in his bunk listening to the wind howl outside and thought about how much had changed in just a few weeks. He'd arrived as a stranger, a man running from his past, and somehow he'd found a future. Not perfect, not without complications, but real and solid and worth fighting for. The discharge papers were still in his pack, still carried their shameful words. But they felt less heavy now, less defining. Because whatever he'd been, whatever mistakes he'd made, he was choosing who to be now. And that choice mattered more than any official document. Lucas returned 5 days later, in the middle of a snowstorm. They almost didn't hear him arrive, the wind was so loud. But Elena, who'd been watching the road obsessively since the telegram arrived, saw him coming and ran out into the snow without a coat, meeting him as he dismounted. Graham watched from the barn as Lucas caught her, as they stood in the falling snow saying things too quiet to hear. Then Elena was pulling him toward the house, and Lucas was following, moving like a man who'd been traveling too long and sleeping too little. Inside, they gave him space to warm up, to shake off the snow and accept coffee without immediately demanding explanations. He looked older somehow, as if the past 2 weeks had aged him years. His eyes were shadowed, his face drawn, and there was a quietness to him that hadn't been there before. "I'm sorry about your father," Mara said simply. "Thank you." Lucas wrapped his hands around his coffee cup, seeking warmth. "I made it in time to talk to him, to say goodbye. That's more than some people get." "Did you tell him about us? About Red Hollow?" Elena asked softly. "I did. Told him everything, why I left, where I went, what I found here." Lucas smiled faintly. "He said I was a fool, but he also said he understood, that sometimes you have to leave home to figure out what home really means." "Wise man," Graham observed. "Stubborn old bastard is what he was," Lucas corrected, but his voice held affection. "Right up to the end, trying to convince me to stay, take over the business. But when he realized I really was coming back here, he gave me his blessing. Said if this was what made me happy, he wouldn't stand in the way." His voice cracked slightly. "He died the next morning." Elena took his hand, just held it, and Lucas seemed to draw strength from the contact. They sat in silence for a while, letting him grieve in his own way, until finally he straightened and looked at them each in turn. "What'd I miss? Any trouble while I was gone?" They filled him in. The alliance with the neighboring ranches, Henderson's warning about Crawford being too quiet, the barn repairs, the threatening letters that had stopped arriving a week ago. Lucas listened intently, asking questions, his mind already working through implications and strategies. "Henderson's right to be worried," he said when they'd finished. "Crawford's not the type to give up. If he's gone quiet, it's because he's planning something that doesn't require preliminary harassment." "Like what?" Elena asked. "I don't know, but whatever it is, it'll be designed to break us all at once. Not just Red Hollow, but the whole alliance. Something that makes it impossible for us to help each other." Lucas stood, moving to the window to stare out at the storm. "We need to be ready for anything." The storm lasted 3 days, dumping enough snow to make travel impossible. They were trapped at the ranch, but it wasn't the hardship it might have been. Instead, they used the time to plan, to strategize, to prepare for whatever Crawford might throw at them. Lucas was different since returning, more focused, more settled somehow. As if facing his father's death had resolved something fundamental in him. He worked harder, laughed easier, and when he looked at Elena, there was no more hesitation in his eyes. Just certainty. On the 4th day, the storm broke and the sun emerged, brilliant and blinding on the fresh snow. Graham was checking the horses when he heard Elena scream. He ran toward the sound, rifle in hand, expecting Crawford's men or worse. Instead, he found Elena standing at the fence line, staring at something in the snow. Mara and Lucas arrived seconds later, both armed, both ready for a fight. What they found was a dead cow, one of their breeding stock. Its throat had been cut cleanly, professionally, and in the snow around it were boot prints. At least 3 different people, all wearing distinctive hobnail boots that left a pattern Graham recognized immediately. "Crawford's men," he said grimly. "They came during the storm, killed the cow, and left. Wanted us to find it, wanted us to know they'd been here." "That's over $1,000 worth of animal," Mara said, her voice shaking with fury. "That cow was pregnant. We were counting on that calf for spring revenue." "It's not about the money," Lucas said quietly. "It's about sending a message.
They can get to us whenever they want. Storm or no storm, guards or no guards. We're vulnerable. Then we stop being vulnerable. Mara turned on her heel, marching back to the house. Get Henderson. Get the others. It's time to end this. Within hours, the alliance was assembled in Red Hollow's parlor. Henderson, the Yamamotos, the Lewises, even the McBrides from the western edge of the valley, who'd been on the fence about joining. 14 people crammed into a space meant for 6, all of them angry, all of them ready for action. This has to stop, Mara said without preamble. Crawford's been systematically terrorizing all of us, trying to force us off land that's rightfully ours. But we have something he doesn't: numbers, unity, and the willingness to fight back. Fight back how? Mr. Yamamoto asked. We're ranchers, not soldiers. We're citizens with rights, Mrs. Lewis corrected sharply. Rights that include defending our property and seeking justice when we're wronged. But she's right that we need a plan beyond just watching our fences. Graham had been thinking about this since they'd found the cow. We need proof. Solid, undeniable proof that Crawford's behind these attacks. Right now it's our word against his, and he has money and influence we don't. But if we can catch his men in the act, document it, get multiple witnesses, that's something even a crooked sheriff can't ignore. How do we catch them? Henderson asked. They're careful, professional. They don't leave evidence. They left boot prints today, Lucas pointed out. Distinctive ones. We also know they work for Crawford's development company, which means they're on his payroll. If we can connect the men to the company and the crimes to the men, we have our case. That's a lot of ifs, McBride said skeptically. So we make it less uncertain. Mara's eyes were bright with determination. We set a trap, give Crawford a target so tempting he can't resist sending his men, and when they come, we're ready. Not just to defend, but to capture. To get our proof. The room erupted in discussion, everyone talking at once, throwing out ideas and concerns. But gradually a plan emerged. Red Hollow would appear vulnerable. Graham and Lucas would make a show of riding to town, leaving only the women to guard the ranch. Crawford's men, watching as they surely were, would see an opportunity. They'd strike, expecting easy targets. Instead, they'd find the entire alliance waiting in ambush. It's risky, Henderson said. If something goes wrong, if they come heavier than we expect, then we fight, Mara said simply. But this ends now. One way or another, this ends. They spent the next day preparing. Graham and Lucas made their trip to town obvious, riding slowly, talking loudly about needing supplies and maybe staying overnight. They even stopped at the saloon, making sure Crawford's men saw them drinking and playing cards, acting like men without a care in the world. Meanwhile, the rest of the alliance moved into position. Hidden in the barn, the house, behind the woodpile, 20 armed men and women waiting in silence as night fell and temperature dropped. Elena and Mara stayed visible, moving around the ranch with lanterns, making themselves obvious targets. It was the hardest part for Graham, watching from his concealed position as the women he'd come to care about put themselves in danger. But he trusted them, trusted their courage and their competence. They didn't have to wait long. Around midnight, 4 men approached on foot, moving with the confidence of people who'd done this before. They split up, 2 heading for the barn, presumably to set fire to it, 2 toward the house where they'd expect to find Mara and Elena sleeping. They never made it. Henderson and his men took the 2 at the barn, stepping out of shadows with rifles leveled and voices hard. Don't move. Don't even breathe wrong. Graham and Lucas intercepted the ones approaching the house, their own weapons drawn, their faces grim in the moonlight. For a moment, Graham thought the men might fight, might try to shoot their way out. But faced with superior numbers and zero cover, they surrendered, dropping their weapons and raising their hands. The barn erupted with light as someone lit the lamps. Mara and Elena emerged from the house, both armed, both looking fiercer than Graham had ever seen them. Within minutes, all 4 of Crawford's men were bound and sitting in the snow, looking significantly less confident than they had an hour ago. Start talking, Henderson said, standing over them. Who sent you? Who's paying you to terrorize honest ranchers? We don't know what you're talking about, one of them said, but his voice lacked conviction. No? Mara knelt in front of him, her voice deadly calm. Then explain why you're on my property at midnight with arson materials and weapons. Explain the boot prints we found by my dead cow. Explain why you work for Territorial Holdings, Marcus Crawford's development company." The man's face went pale. "You can't prove—" "We can prove all of it," Lucas interrupted. "We've been documenting everything, every threat, every attack, every suspicious incident, and now we have you, caught in the act with 20 witnesses. That's enough to put you in prison for years, unless you cooperate." The four men exchanged glances. Then slowly, the one who'd spoken before nodded. "What do you want to know?" What they learned over the next hour was both enlightening and infuriating. Crawford had indeed hired these men to drive ranchers off their land. He'd promised them bonuses for successful intimidation, bigger bonuses for property destruction that couldn't be traced back to him. He'd been operating this scheme for over a year, systematically buying up the valley one terrorized ranch at a time. "Why?" Mara asked. "Why does he want this land so badly?" "Railroad's coming through," one of the men said. "Not public yet, but Crawford knows. Route's already surveyed. Whoever controls the land when the railroad arrives will make millions selling right-of-way access. That's what this is really about. Water rights are valuable, sure, but railroad money? That's generational wealth." The pieces clicked into place. Crawford wasn't just consolidating power. He was positioning himself to profit massively from development he knew was coming. Everyone else saw a struggling valley. He saw a future boomtown. "Well," Henderson said with grim satisfaction, "let's see how his investment looks from inside a jail cell." They tied Crawford's men to horses, and the entire alliance rode to town together, arriving just before dawn. The sheriff, roused from bed and faced with 20 angry citizens and 4 confessed criminals, had no choice but to make arrests. Even better, one of the men agreed to testify against Crawford in exchange for leniency, providing detailed records of payments and orders. By the time the sun rose fully, Marcus Crawford was under arrest for conspiracy, extortion, property destruction, and a dozen other charges. His development company's assets were frozen pending investigation, and the alliance of ranchers, united and unbreakable, stood witness to justice finally being served. They returned to Red Hollow as heroes, exhausted and exhilarated. As everyone began to disperse to their own properties, Henderson pulled Graham aside one final time. "You did good work here. All of you. You gave us something to fight for and showed us how to do it. This valley won't forget that." "We just did what needed doing," Graham said. "That's exactly why it matters." Henderson mounted his horse, then paused. "Mara's father would be proud. Of her, of what she's built here. Just thought you should know." After everyone left, the 4 of them stood in the yard, looking at Red Hollow in the morning light. The ranch that had been dying when they'd arrived was alive again. Not perfect, still struggling in places, but fundamentally sound. More importantly, it was theirs, fully, legally, without threat or debt hanging over their heads. "So," Lucas said after a long silence, "what now?" "Now we work," Mara said simply. "We repair what's broken, we build what's needed, and we make this place into something that lasts. All 4 of us, together." "Is that a proposal?" Elena asked, her voice teasing but her eyes serious. "It's a statement of fact." But Mara was smiling. "Though I suppose if we're going to be partners in every other way, we might as well make it official. Save the neighbors from gossiping about unmarried men and women living together." Graham felt his heart skip. He looked at Mara, this woman who'd been nothing but sharp edges and suspicion when they'd met, who'd slowly revealed layers of strength and vulnerability and courage. "Is that what you want? Marriage?" "I want partnership," Mara corrected. "I want someone who sees me as an equal, who'll work beside me instead of trying to control me. If that comes with marriage papers, fine, but the partnership is what matters." "Then yes," Graham said simply. "Yes to partnership. Yes to building something together. Yes to all of it." Lucas and Elena had drifted closer together during this conversation, and now Lucas took her hand openly, no longer hiding what had been growing between them. "What about you?" he asked her. "You willing to marry a man who comes with complicated family history and questionable decision-making skills?" "Only if you're willing to marry a woman who sent for strangers through the mail because she couldn't think of a better solution," Elena replied, but she was grinning. "I think we're equally ridiculous, which makes us perfect for each other." They made it official 3 weeks later in a barn ceremony that Henderson helped organize. The whole alliance came, along with half the town, curious to see the ranchers who'd stood up to Marcus Crawford and won. It wasn't fancy, just two couples promising to build lives together, surrounded by people who'd learned the power of standing united. Graham stood beside Mara, her hand in his, and thought about the journey that had brought him here. He'd lost his military career, his reputation, his sense of purpose, but he'd gained something infinitely more valuable: a home, a partner, a family forged not by blood, but by choice. The discharge papers were still in his pack. He'd keep them, he decided, not as a reminder of shame, but as proof that sometimes the right choice looks like failure, that sometimes walking away from what you're supposed to be is the only way to become who you're meant to be. Winter settled over Red Hollow with snow that was clean and beautiful instead of threatening. The ranch stood firm, the animals were healthy, and four people who'd been strangers now woke each day as family. It wasn't a fairy tale ending. There would be hard days ahead, struggles with weather and money, and all the 1,000 difficulties that came with ranching in Montana territory. But they'd face those challenges together, with allies surrounding them and love binding them. Red Hollow hadn't been saved by mail-order husbands or desperate measures. It had been saved by people choosing each other, choosing to fight, choosing to believe that even broken things could be repaired if you were willing to work hard enough. As spring approached and the snow began to melt, revealing the land beneath, Graham stood at the fence line where he'd stood that first day. Mara joined him, fitting naturally under his arm, and together they watched the sun rise over mountains that no longer felt like barriers, but like protection. "Regret it?" she asked quietly. "Answering that advertisement? Coming here?" "Not for a second," Graham said, and meant it completely. "Best decision I ever made. Even better than refusing those orders? Especially better than that. That choice saved my soul. This choice gave me a life worth living." Behind them, the house was warm with the smell of Elena's cooking. Lucas's voice drifted through the open window, laughing at something, sounding lighter than Graham had ever heard him. The horses nickered in the barn, the cattle lowed in the distance, and somewhere a meadowlark sang its complicated song. Red Hollow was alive. Not just surviving, but thriving, built by four people who'd found each other through desperation and stayed through determination. They'd come seeking salvation and found something better: purpose, partnership, and the kind of love that grew slowly, rooted deep enough to weather any storm. The ranch stretched before them, 2,000 acres of possibility and promise. And standing there together, choosing each other day after day, they knew they'd built something that would last. Not because it was perfect, but because they'd decided it was worth the fight.